My name is Mildred Schindler Janzen, and I was born on March 11th, 1929, near Great Bend, Kansas. When I was 6 months old, we went back to Germany because my grandmother had died and my grandfather requested my dad come back and take over the farm. Life on our farm was normal. My mother baked bread once a week, big loaves of bread, about 8, 10 loaves. And of course my father tended to the livestock. My dad raised rye and potatoes. That's what our main crops were. And of course we had milk cows, we had hogs, my mother raised chickens, ducks, geese. We all worked together, and of course we worked in the fields with our folks. On Sunday was our church, go to church, and of course we walked. Everywhere we went, we either bicycle or walked. The Nazis were in our town. One lived in our town, and he would come occasionally and check on our farm. When he came one day and he said to me, "Little girl, feed the chickens." And I said, "Well, we don't feed the chickens till evening." And he said, "Well, I want you to feed them." So I did. But all he wanted to do was count them, make sure we were giving enough eggs to the government.
Du meine Arbeit für richtig hältst, ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe, dass ich nicht...
My family did not like Hitler, but you could not say anything. My dad had been here in the United States 8 years, and they were watching him, so he had to be very careful. My dad went into town, to a neighboring town where the courthouse was, on some business. And he came back and he said to my mother, "You can't believe what I saw. The shop window broken out, this clothing on the streets." It happened in town everywhere because most of the merchants were Jewish. And I did not know what happened to the Jews till I came to this country. That's how quiet it was kept. In 1945, 1st of February, is when the Russians came. The Russians told us that we had to leave in 2 hours. So we packed up, each one had a bundle, either a small suitcase or a bundle, and just packed up some clothes and some food. And this was first part of February, so it was very, very cold. They just like herded you out. We had soldiers on each side of us. About 6 families had their belongings on one wagon, and some of them had little heart-drawn wagons. Some of them had grandparents on the wagons, and we saw grandparents die. The family put them in a road ditch and covered them with a blanket or a coat, and they couldn't tell them goodbye because the Russians were right there with the guns. Go, go, you can't take time to tell them goodbye. And we also saw babies die. It was just too cold. After the Russians were there a while, because my dad was with us as we traveled from town to town. And then they came and said, "We need for you to drive the cattle." They did this for a while, and then they said we need to have him move on and do more other places. So they said he'd be gone for 5 days, and he never did come back. my mother would, I don't know where she found the lard, but she would heat it and put it around my neck, put lard on my neck. Ooh, I can still feel it. And wrap a rag around it, just wrap. And also she put flour. I always had rosy cheeks, so she put flour on my face. So I looked real pale. And when the soldiers came in, the officers, they looked at me and said, she's sick. So they leave me alone. And then the one morning, they came earlier than what she expected, and I didn't have that done yet. So they said, you wash. So we were loaded up into a wagon, about 50 ladies, 40, 50 ladies and girls and 10 men, and they took us to another town to do laundry. We were there 3 weeks. We slept on, of course, on the bunk beds, and the straw was like just about an inch long. And about the second or third night, we started itching. Of course, we slept in our clothes. That's all we had. It's just what we had on. And I had long hair. I wish they would have cut my hair or shaved my head. I would have cried, but I'm sure it would have been better than having long hair if you didn't sleep on straw and didn't have a comb to comb it. Our food was potato soup with rancid bacon for breakfast, mashed potatoes and rancid bacon for lunch, and potato soup with rancid bacon for supper, and a piece of black bread. The first day I washed 34 shirts. When I didn't wash just 34 shirts, the officer came around and looked at the shirts, and it wasn't quite clean. And she took that shirt and hit me in the face with that wet shirt. Put it back in the water, and I thought I had that shirt finished. And tears in the water, because it was a wooden washboard. It was so sharp that when you go down and you miss it, didn't have a piece, it would take your skin off. And we used Hitler soap, which is half the size of a piece of lava soap. Here is your Hitler soap. You wash with that. So the third day, I couldn't sleep because my hands were hurting like it's just like if you had a burn, because my hands were raw. They had told us, the Russian officer, a lady officer, they had told us, if you refuse to work, we shoot you in front of the others so they don't refuse also. I didn't care. My dad was gone. I didn't know if I see my mother and brother again. I don't know where they were, what town I was in. And so I just stepped out of the line and I says, look at my hands. They hurt so bad. I have nothing to put on there, and I'm not going to wash anymore. And I shook my head like that. She just come up to me, pushed me back in the line, and chose the next girl. There were no feelings, there was just desperation. Where's my family? Do I still have my mother and brother? My dad was gone. It didn't matter. I didn't care. It didn't matter. They could get rid of me too. I didn't care. After 3 weeks, they said that they're gonna get a new crew. Well, they had everybody was worn out. They wanted to get a new crew. They picked us up, but they didn't take us back. They says, you can go. When I was looking for my mother and brother, I was describing my mother as being short and kind of heavy set, and my brother has thick glasses and is about 13 or 14 years old. And have you seen them? No, we haven't. So there we go then to the next town and do the same thing. And that's when I just like the Lord put me there. There she was cooking on a fire. She was cooking over an open fire, and there was my mother. When they told us we could go back home, it was just a couple days after I came back from the wash camp. They told us we could go back home because the war was over. Well, we packed up our little wagon. It was just a little wagon, there wasn't much in it, and we headed home. And when we got home, we could see there was a hole in the roof where a cannon had hit the roof. And as we got closer, there was nothing. There was no livestock. There was nothing. It was just like, it was abandoned. And we walked in, and they had made a laundry out of our home like what we were in. Bored holes in the hardwood floors to let the water come down, a hole underneath the window. You just pour the water out like that. You don't carry it out. You just pour it on the floor and it runs out. We've never seen anything like it, and that's what they did to our house. Mold was growing on the walls. The first thing my mother wanted to do, go down the basement and see if they found what my dad had buried. The basement had a brick floor, and there was this big pile of bricks dug up. And my mother said, "Oh no, this is where Papa buried the bag with the papers." And she lifted the first brick, and there was the bag. So something called them away, because they would have finished digging up the tan, but it was the Lord. He took care of us. My dad also had buried food in a barn underneath hay and straw. And we dug it up. My mother said, "We will be very careful, use a little at a time. We'll ration it so it lasts a long time because there was nothing else." When we were looking for things to put back in a house, that we had a bed or a mattress or something, we had to go to this big pile. They had taken everybody's furniture and put it in a big pile in town. And we went there, and we found some garden seeds. And I was so excited. I said, "Mutti, we got spinach and we got lettuce." And she says, "Well, we'll plant it." So we did, and we were just getting ready to harvest it, and the Poles came and told us we had to leave. There were about four soldiers walked in, and they said, "The Russians gave this land to us, and you will have to leave or stay, become Polish citizen, and speak Polish." And I said, "Well, my mother is not feeling well." One of the soldiers said, "Well, I just shoot her." And can you imagine someone saying that to somebody that is 16 and 14? Shoot your mother. Well, your dad is gone already. So she said, can we decide tomorrow?" She said, "Can we tell you tomorrow?" "Yes, we'll be back tomorrow. We give you one day to think about it." And when they came back, she said, we will not stay, we go. The Polish soldiers took us to the River Oder. Frankfurt is divided. Half of Frankfurt is Poland and half of Frankfurt is Germany. The river divides the city. The Polish soldiers escorted us to the bridge, the whole town. And then they said, go. My mother said, you know, my dad's sister, one of his sisters, lives in Berlin, and we knew her address. It took us several days to go there, and we found her. We went through Rebel. We saw where a lot of bombings were going on in Berlin, and they were glad to see us. They were glad we were still alive. And they just had a small place, so we said, you know, we've got to find a refugee camp, and that's where we went. And that's where we stayed, and of course we got fed there till my mother felt better. They said, we got to clear out the camp. We have more people coming. And they said, send us to the American, French, English, but please don't send us to a Russian zone. Again, we ended up in a Russian zone. The mayor got an order to send 30 girls to Siberia. And he says to my mother, since you're not feeling the best yet, I will let Mildred here till the first part of the year. And my mother dreamt this up. She went, in order to get a train ticket, you had to have an excuse to go on a train. So my mother used the excuse that we have warm winter clothes in Berlin at my aunt's, and that I should go get them. And he wrote the excuse. I got my ticket. I says, I don't want to go to Berlin. She says, you got to, otherwise you be sent to Siberia, and then we won't ever see you again. So I went to Berlin. She took my birth certificate, folded it, stuck it in my bra, pinned it in here in my bra, and she says, this might help you. And when I got to Berlin, my cousin was working for the American consulate, and she told the secretary about me, and that I was born in America, I have American birth certificate. And she says, you have her come to talk to us. I went there and he looked at it. He says, my dear girl, you are an American. I'm telling my story now because I just want our young people to know, to be aware that this can happen. I didn't think when I was a young girl that this was going to happen to me, but it did, and I think it can happen. And I know who holds tomorrow, and I know who holds my hands. And I thank the Lord for that.